Hi everybody, it's David McIntosh, the paediatric ENT doctor again. Just reflecting on some cases I've seen over the past few days, thought that I would take the opportunity just to share some information in terms of a common scenario that I've been noticing. And that is some parents being told that their kids will just grow into their tonsils. So these are in children where they have large tonsils, and these children are snoring, not sleeping properly, waking up tired. And they're being told that that's okay and that they can sit back and relax and do nothing and just let things get better over time. Now, that has some concerning features to me. If a child is actually not breathing properly at night and is just left to outgrow it, we do know that some kids over time, the severity of their snoring and breathing problems will lessen over time. What we need to do though is bear in mind what are the long-term consequences of that period of time where they weren't breathing properly. Now, if there are no long-term consequences to these children, it's just a temporary issue, and as a temporary issue they get better, then that would be a reasonable thing to say. It would be perfectly reasonable to say, well, look, yeah, they're not doing very well. We can see they're struggling. It's not very good, but just ride it out. They'll get better and they'll stay better. So it's important to highlight that the resolution of breathing and sleep problems by itself is not the same thing as them getting better, because the research shows that in children where they've had an episode in their life of what we call sleep-disordered breathing, which can be mouth breathing, it can be snoring, it can be struggling to breathe at night, or it can be stopping breathing at night. If they've had that for a period of 6 months in the first 7 years of their life, then they actually run into problems that translate into persistent problems. And the persistent problems are things that hang around, relate to their neurological system, so their brain, and their cardiovascular system, so their heart, blood vessels. So with regards to the brain, you will have seen lots of information we've been sharing recently about brain damage. So this is brain damage due to low oxygen levels getting to the brain. So, for example, in Australia, my country, we're really vigilant about worrying about children falling into swimming pools who can't swim and being submersed underwater for a period of time and then having to be retrieved and do mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and these children survive, but they have injuries to their brain because they were drowning, they couldn't breathe. And it's the same thing with children at night. And I'm not saying this to be scaremongering, I'm saying this because I think we really need to understand the problem properly. The snoring or the mouth breathing that goes away still leaves damage in its wake. So there are long-term consequences. So for example, there was a study that was published in 2012. Lead author was a lady by the name of Karen Bonuck. That's spelled B-O-N-U-C-K, if you want to care to look her up. And they looked at roughly 11,000 children, first 7 years of their life. Any child that had what we call sleep-disordered breathing, which is that mouth breathing, snoring, stopping breathing at night scenario, any child that had it for 6 months, whether it stayed, whether it went away, those children that had it, there was a near doubling of the incidence of behavioural problems, problems with their concentration, school performance, and so forth, even in those kids where they had, I guess, if you want to use the term, outgrown it. So they'd outgrown the airway obstruction, but in the meantime, the airway obstruction had caused problems along the way. So that's one bit of information that we know. The other thing that we know from some Canadian research is that the earlier on in life where the problem starts, the greater chance of that damage persisting. So in children at night, their brains are very active. It's the same for all our brains. Our brains is where it basically filters out the information that we've accumulated through the day, and we say, that was important for me to remember, and that's just trivial nonsense. And that consolidates the memory. And what they were showing in children, the younger they were, the poorer their memory consolidation was. And we've done brain scans in these children, and we can see the areas of the brain that deal with concentration, behaviour, memory, are not working properly. So it's important to understand the difference. There's a big difference between children outgrowing an airway problem versus children having a consequence of that airway problem even when they outgrow it. So we are less interested in children outgrowing the problem from a snoring and obstruction point of view, because look, we know that a good number of kids will do that. But those kids, when we study those kids, don't actually fully recover in terms of their brain function. And the same sometimes with their cardiovascular system as well. So I just want to highlight essentially that if you're told that your child will outgrow it, the only thing they might outgrow is the obstruction. The thing that they're at an increased risk of things persisting is adverse outcomes with regards to brain health, brain function. So if someone tells you, don't worry, they'll outgrow it, that person isn't quite delivering the whole story. And that may not necessarily be their fault, because there are many broad schools of thought on this, and I sit at one end of the spectrum. But my agenda is really simple, is that kids are not supposed to snore. They're not supposed to mouth breathe. And leaving them to outgrow the problem is really just asking for trouble. So I can only again emphasize that when it comes to understanding your child, understanding their behavior, the things that you will put down to, oh, they're just a boy, or, oh, it's the terrible twos or the troublesome threes. That's the age where these things start to peak. So as a society, we've basically become accustomed to fobbing off childhood behavioural problems that very possibly relate to breathing and sleep problems. So a little bit of a long-winded talk today, but I'm just obviously so passionate about this, and I think it's just so important that I'm just going to keep putting the message out there, and slowly but surely we're going to find these kids, and we're going to help these kids, and they're going to reach their full potential. The numbers show that we're only finding maybe 1 in 10 to 1 in 20 children with this problem. So there's a massive amount of undetected pathology out there. And these kids could be doing so much better in their life, so much better with their concentration and their behaviour and their school performance, and then their long-term life outcomes. So I just want to help kids reach their full potential. And one of the ways to do that I can do that is I help them hear better and I help them breathe better. So again, don't ignore the snore. Thanks.